Hello Internet, it's Mark. I'm back from my vacation a little bit early. You all haven't been doing anything too crazy while I've been gone, right? Right? Internet, I was on vacation for 2 weeks, and all of this happened while I was out? Today, I want to talk about the story surrounding the Open Gaming License and the new Open RPG Creative License that Paizo is sponsoring, and talk about why they're important on today's episode of The Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello travelers and tourists, my name is Mark and I am the local disaster tour guide. That's right, I am a storyteller who thought that there was no way a company could create a bigger PR blunder than trying to sell $1,000 playing cards that you're not actually allowed to play. I'm surprised I was wrong about that. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder, and welcome to a conversation about all of the news from the last couple of weeks concerning the Open Gaming License from Wizards of the Coast and the new Open RPG Creative License that Paizo and a number of other publishers are sponsoring. It has been a crazy couple of weeks in the TTRPG sphere, and a couple of days ago at my work, I watched my phone just constantly updating with all sorts of new information and discussion surrounding this incredibly important moment in gaming history. Also, I hope my boss is not watching this video. Anyways, so today I wanted to take some time and discuss why the OGL and the new O.R.C are so important and what it means for the TTRPG community. Now, a couple of important things I'd like to say. Number one, this video is being recorded on Friday the 13th, 2023, which means that anything I discuss in this video is dated to Friday the 13th, 2023. This video will probably go live on Monday or Tuesday, and there's a very real possibility that something could change between now and then. While I am editing this video, if something does change, I will attempt to make links or other sources available so that you can check out any appropriate updates, but do be aware that this conversation may be at least partially dated. As an extension of that point, I will be linking a number of sources in the video description. These are going to be some of the most important sources that I have been following for the last couple of weeks, and the sources that I found the most useful in understanding everything that's been going on. Now, obviously, there has been a lot of information of varying quality out there, and there are probably sources out there that are better than the ones I had access to, but I'm going to provide some of the things that I was following so that you at least have a frame of reference for the conversation, and that does include the post that Wizards of the Coast made today about the Open Gaming License and some of their plans going forward. I may not be the biggest fan of what Wizards of the Coast said today, but I do believe that if you're going to react to what they said, that you should read it for yourself. So that will be in the video description along with some of the other sources that I will be referencing. Another thing worth noting, I am not a lawyer, I am not the CEO of a big business, and my perspective on this issue is very much the perspective of a lifelong hobbyist. Yes, I have a monetized YouTube channel, but my YouTube channel is small, and I realize that my voice is relatively minor. My opinion on this matter is probably not worth the approximately 17 cents that I will get paid for making this video. Be aware there are other perspectives and voices in the community, and it is always a good idea to hear from a wide variety of perspectives to help you properly understand an issue. In other words, don't just take my word for it, but research things for yourself, hear other points of view, and do your best to make an informed decision about where you think you should stand on these issues. I would like to make a quick note up front. I have already posted on my community tab that I am a huge fan of the O.R.C. that Paizo and other companies are working to publish, and it is my intention to support the O.R.C. as best I can with this channel moving forward. To that effect, if you are a content creator or publisher who is supporting the O.R.C., be sure to check out the All Hail the Orc portion of this video in the timestamp, because I would like to feature some of your content on my channel as my way of saying thank you for supporting the O.R.C., which I consider to be an important boon to the gaming community. And speaking of support, I might as well mention all of that YouTube stuff. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. You can check out my free Discord, my Patreon, those are linked in the video description. But as always, the best thing you can do, jump down to the comment section, leave your thoughts, your observations. I want to hear from you. I know that this is an emotional topic for a lot of people, but I also know I have a fantastic community, and I expect that the conversation will be respectful and informative and cordial, and most importantly, beneficial to the gaming community as a whole. Alright, let's get started. Now, my goal in this video is to talk about why I think the Open Gaming License and the Open RPG Creative License are so important to TTRPGs as a hobby. But before I talk about that, I actually want to step back a little bit and tell a personal story, because I think this personal story will help highlight why I am so passionate about these topics. I want to share the story of one of the major events that caused me to walk away from Dungeons & Dragons. Now, D&D was a game that I loved. I played a ton of D&D 3.0 and 3.5. My introduction to TTRPGs as a hobby occurred right as D&D 3.0 was coming on the scene, and so as you might imagine, that was one of the first major games that I played, and it had a huge impact on me as a gamer. I had a lot of years and time, and let's be honest, probably way too much money invested into D&D, and it was a major part of my life, and for a long time, Dungeons & Dragons was a very big part of my identity. But I did eventually walk away, and like many people, I walked away from Dungeons & Dragons around the time that 4th edition came on the scene. Now, there were several events that played into this. Near the end of D&D 3.5, there were a lot of rumors circulating about whether or not D&D 4th edition was going to happen, and I was one of those people who was pretty sure D&D 4th edition was coming, in part because Wizards of the Coast started publishing some really, really pathetic products. Like, this book, Cityscape, is the worst RPG book I think I ever paid money for. And I remember after opening Cityscape and just realizing how poorly written it was and how much I didn't like the book, I remember thinking to myself, Wizards of the Coast stopped trying. 4th edition is going to happen. There was a period in the lead up to 4E where WotC did their best to try to keep 4E quiet, but for those who were paying attention, we definitely knew it was on their way, and eventually the announcement of 4th edition happened. And in those first few months after that announcement took place, something very significant happened in my town. 4th edition inadvertently contributed to the failure of one of my local gaming stores. Now, this story is a little bit oversimplified because I'm talking about situations that are at least partially private, but there was a local gaming store that I had been a customer of for quite some time, and I distinctly remember after 4th edition was announced that the owners of that gaming store passed along some pretty devastating news. Wizards of the Coast had officially said that gaming stores could only sell 4th edition product. If they sold any other edition of Dungeons & Dragons, they would not be allowed to sell 4th edition, effectively cutting that store off from the largest game in the TTRPG sphere. Wizards of the Coast effectively said, You must sell 4E, you can only sell 4E, no other version of this game is acceptable. And so the owners of that business understandably said, we will only be selling 4th edition product. And I remember in that conversation, I was talking to the owner of the business. One of the things I asked them, I said, well, am I still going to be allowed to play my 3rd edition game in your store? Like, you have tables for games, can I still bring in my 3rd edition books and play my 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons games even though you're not selling 3rd edition? And the owner of my local gaming store said, no, we are not allowed to host any other edition than 4th edition. If we host any other game, we will lose the right to sell 4th edition products, so you are not allowed to have your games here anymore. My local gaming store lost my business that day. And it was a frustrating conversation because the owner of the business wasn't trying to be rude to me and I wasn't trying to be rude to the owner, but because of a corporate decision that WotC made about 4th edition, they put my local gaming store in the position where they basically had to tell the customers, play this specific game or get out. And my local gaming store lost a lot of customers, lost a ton of business, and there were certainly other issues that contributed to the downfall of that store, but the birth of 4th edition killed one of the local gaming stores in my community, and to this day, it is something that I hold against Wizards of the Coast, and it frustrates me very, very deeply. Now, there are a ton of nuances to that story that I'm not diving into, and there are probably a lot of questions that you might have. I could chase a ton of rabbits, but all of them go back to the idea that Wizards of the Coast made a casually negligent decision at best, or a deliberately destructive decision at worst, that contributed to the death of a local gaming store. And I suspect that what happened to the local gaming store in my community probably played out in many other places around the country and around the world. When Paizo announced that they were going to be publishing their own game that was a spin-off of D&D 3.5, I jumped ship very quickly because Wizards of the Coast had lost my trust. Now, over the years, Wizards of the Coast has done some things that I have liked, and I have seen what I thought were some changes in their attitude and their position that made me think that maybe they learned their lesson from the destructive decisions of 4th edition. I won't dive into everything, but there has been a lot of good stuff that has come out of D&D 5th edition. It may not be my preferred game, but I can see a lot of good that's been done, and when WotC announced 1D&D and was looking towards what a lot of people are calling 6th edition, I'll admit I was curious. I was probably going to stick with Pathfinder, but I wanted to see what Wizards of the Coast was going to bring to the table. Unfortunately, the modern story is reminding me a lot of the story of Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. And the things I've been seeing from WotC as they've been moving through 1D&D are reminding me of some of the worst moments of 4E and what it did to the TTRPG sphere. I talked about how at the end of 3.5, Wizards of the Coast started publishing very poor quality books, and it was obvious that they stopped caring about the quality of products they were putting out. And though I don't play a ton of D&D 5e, I have heard a lot of pushback from the community around books like Strixhaven and Spelljammer, where, though I haven't read the books myself, I kind of get the impression that Wizards of the Coast has once again just kind of lowered the standard of what they put out because they already had a new game that they were looking towards. I don't want that to be true, but I've seen it play out in the past, and I'm seeing similar signs now. I'm going to admit it's kind of striking a fear in me. But on a much larger scale, Wizards of the Coast's recent behavior has reminded me of the kind of destructive behavior that WotC tried to employ in the 4th edition era, and that's where we come to the conversation about the open gaming license and what WotC tried to do with OGL 1.1. Back in December, WotC announced that they were going to be updating the open gaming license. And while there was some community concern upon that initial announcement, some of the initial conversation didn't seem too troubling for the TTRPG sphere. One of the things that was discussed is the new open gaming license would feature royalties, but that those royalties were targeted at only the largest content creators in the gaming sphere, so organizations like Critical Role. The announcement was presented as something that was not going to impact your typical content creator. However, one concerning item that was mentioned back in December is that the new open gaming license would require any content creator to actually sign on to the open gaming license, that you would be required to actually agree to its specific terms. From there, we didn't hear a lot until about 2 weeks ago when the OGL 1.1 was leaked, and that's where the firestorm really started. Now, not everything in the OGL 1.1 was necessarily terrible. The resistance to D&D NFTs, that's probably worth shutting down. The clarifying of restrictions against like racism and bigotry and that kind of stuff, certainly worth clearly stating for the gaming community. I'm not going to pretend everything Wizards was trying to do was terrible, but there were some pretty big problems with OGL 1.1, and the biggest problem was OGL 1.1 explicitly attempted to deauthorize OGL 1.0a. Now, the original open gaming license was presented as a perpetual license. Any content creator, any publisher could take that perpetual license, OGL 1.0a, and create content, and from now till the end of time, make content that was compatible with Dungeons & Dragons, and sell that content with no expectation of royalties to Wizards of the Coast. Admittedly, that's very generous, but the contract was very explicit in its language that this was a perpetual option that publishers could use. Along comes OGL 1.1, and Wizards of the Coast explicitly attempted to cut that perpetual contract down and say it is no longer valid. That in and of itself was a massive shock. I do not want to downplay how drastic of a change that is for anyone familiar with the original open gaming license. To go from something that is going to be available for all time to suddenly finding out that that document is no longer valid, that's shocking. And people who built their company on making products through the open gaming license were understandably upset. That alone would have produced a gigantic and completely valid backlash, but there were other things that Wizards of the Coast did that made this worse. One of the things they did was they explicitly stated that the new OGL 1.1 could be terminated by Wizards of the Coast with only 30 days notice. Now, if you are in any kind of publishing, 30 days notice on a license being thrown out the window is devastating. Honestly, as a YouTuber, I am scripting stuff that I'm going to be filming next month myself, and I'm not publishing a physical book. The idea that a license might be thrown out with only a 30-day warning could be a financial death blow to small businesses and represents a complete callous disregard to the entire third-party publishing industry in the gaming sphere. Wizards of the Coast attempted to put an absolutely reckless provision for overturning OGL 1.1 into that new license. And then, on top of that, OGL 1.1 included another clause that was absolutely terrifying to a lot of people, where Wizards of the Coast basically said, we have the right to reproduce or use your content whenever we want, wherever we want, however we want, and we owe you nothing if we choose to do this. Let's be very clear. That is an abuse of power. There is no other language to describe that particular clause, but when you look at a license that offers 30 days worth of guarantee to one party, and then offers a perpetual and irrevocable right to the other party, it is not fair, it is not balanced, it is just an abusive contract. Wizards of the Coast gave themselves legal leeway to steal from companies smaller than them and to protect themselves in court if they tried to do so. In other words, if you can't tell, the Open Gaming License has been a hot mess ever since it was originally leaked, and after it was leaked, Wizards of the Coast basically refused to respond for well over a week. I think there was a single post acknowledging the controversy and saying that they would say something at some point, but really and truthfully, Wizards of the Coast was hiding. They were refusing to respond, and the entire TTRPG community was understandably terrified about what this incredibly draconian new license was going to mean to the gaming hobby. Fast forward to yesterday, and listen, you all know I'm a Paizo fanboy, so you all know that I love to brag about Paizo anytime I can, but yesterday Paizo kind of proved why I love this company. Paizo stepped in and responded to this whole situation by announcing a new Open RPG Creative License, or ORC, that is going to be system neutral or system agnostic as an alternative to the Open Gaming License. And this was a burst of light into this story. There are so many ways that Paizo has brought some hope back to the gaming community, and Paizo, I think, deserves some serious credit for the work that they have done in responding to the mess that Wizards of the Coast has made. First off, just offering an alternative to the Open Gaming License, giving publishers a second option, is worthwhile because it gives those publishers, those content creators, room to breathe. The leaked OGL contract had a very narrow deadline for content creators to sign on and accept the terms of OGL 1.1, and I imagine a lot of content creators were terrified of the choice that they were facing. The simple fact that Paizo stepped onto the scene and said, "We are giving you a second choice," that is worth celebrating. However, Paizo has gone above and beyond in creating an alternative to the OGL that I think should be celebrated. First off, Paizo explicitly wants the ORC to be perpetual and irrevocable. They are explicitly including language that is going to make sure that the contract that they are creating is a safe license for content creators to use from now till forever, and Paizo is working with a law firm that will be administering this whole process, meaning Paizo is not going to own the ORC license that they are creating. Ergo, even if Paizo one day becomes the supervillain that WotC is trying to be right now, Paizo will be powerless to try to upend the license that they are creating. Paizo is future-proofing the ORC license against the very drama we are seeing at this moment. As noted, this ORC license is going to be system neutral. Anyone that publishes a TTRPG has the option of presenting their own content similar to D&D's SRD, if you will. They can present their own content and essentially open up their game and their gaming world to the entire RPG sphere, allowing content creators all across the world to access a variety of games and allowing the collective creativity of the RPG community to potentially benefit multiple gaming systems the way the OGL has benefited D&D in the past. There's a lot of other stuff that goes into Paizo's announcement of the Open RPG Creative License. There's a lot of stuff that could be celebrated, especially Paizo's 25% off sale on their website. By the way, you can use the code OpenGaming on Paizo's website right now to get some cheaper Pathfinder products if you're so inclined. That was a masterful stroke of business trolling, and Paizo, I love you for it. But the big picture takeaway is Paizo has stepped in and offered this ORC as an alternative to the Open Gaming License, and we are looking at what could be a seismic shift in the TTRPG community. This idea of open gaming that has so powerfully influenced Dungeons & Dragons in the past being applied to a wide variety of games, this is huge. And the explosion that we've seen with D&D in the past could now be happening to all sorts of gaming systems in the future, and I am excited to see what happens when the collective creativity of this hobby is unleashed in so many directions all at once. We are on the edge of something very, very exciting. However, there is a little bit more to this story. Wizards of the Coast did finally publicly respond in an article on D&D Beyond that is linked in the video description, where they attempted some PR to try to walk back some of the drama that they have faced in recent days. Now, there have been several YouTubers who have done some extensive discussions already of what Wizards of the Coast posted today and why Wizards of the Coast article reads like professional gaslighting. There are a lot of people who really don't like Wizards of the Coast apology, and to be honest, I understand where a lot of people are coming from. If you want a good discussion on some of the problems with what Wizards of the Coast wrote today, I would check out No Nat 1, D&D Shorts, or possibly even The Rules Lawyer. All three of them have done some pretty good videos with why WotC's response is not really a response and why there are a lot of problems with what Wizards of the Coast said today. However, I really want to focus in on one problem I had with Wizards of the Coast response today. Wizards of the Coast went through and tried to talk about their motives and their goals and what they were trying to do, what they were trying to accomplish. And to be honest, when you're reading it, it comes across as disingenuous in many different ways. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're being honest, maybe they're not. Regardless of which side you try to take here, there is a problem for me that I can't escape with what Wizards of the Coast said about what is now the Open Gaming License 2.0 that they are eventually going to release, and that is nowhere in the article that Wizards of the Coast released today did they use the word irrevocable. When Paizo announced the Open RPG Creative License, the O.R.C, they emphasized the word irrevocable over and over and over and over. They wanted everyone to understand they were creating a license that would be perpetually available and that they couldn't come in later and try to take away. Wizards of the Coast made a lot of promises today. They were going to respect content creators and their rights and their ownership, and they weren't going to have a license back provision, and they were going to do all of these other things that protected the D&D space. They said a lot of things that sound good. I'm not going to lie, there are some nice promises in there. But they never once said, we will put a clause in making our words irrevocable. Wizards of the Coast made a lot of good promises today, but we are 2 weeks past a gigantic betrayal of a promise they made 2 decades ago. The fact that they are not willing to legally bind themselves to their promises does not sit well with me. Paizo is willing to put the word irrevocable on the new license that they are creating, and assuming that they do so, they are binding themselves to their word forever. That's big. WotC is not willing to do that. That kind of says to me that no matter what this new OGL 2.0 looks like, it looks like something I cannot trust, and that I could not in good conscience tell other content creators to trust themselves. Wizards of the Coast seems dead set on the idea that they can change the OGL now, and later they can change it again if it is more beneficial for them. For a company that just put content creators in a very bad space, I kind of feel like they're still trying to set people up. That's not a good look, and it makes me really not trust what Wizards of the Coast is trying to do right now. So what that brings me to is, right now, I stand fully behind the Open RPG Creative License that Paizo is attempting to bring about. I think that the work that Paizo and a lot of other content creators are doing I think Kobold Press and Chaosium and several other pretty big names have signed on to this. I think that the O.R.C. is the right direction for the tabletop RPG community. The OGL was a phenomenal document in the history of tabletop RPGs, and I am glad that it existed, but right now it is a document that is owned by a single company that has proven they have no interest in honoring all of the good that came out of that particular document. In comparison, the O.R.C. seems to be a genuine attempt to create a space for this hobby and for the content creators that support this hobby that is fair and equitable to all. It doesn't seem like Wizards of the Coast can present an open gaming license that is going to be as good for the game as the O.R.C. will be, and for that reason, I have to say all hail the orc. I think it's time to take open gaming out of the hands of Wizards of the Coast and put it in the hands of the hobby as a whole and allow every gaming company to operate in the same space with the same expectations and have access to the same beautiful creativity that Dungeons & Dragons has had for so long. And I think that at the end of the day, that is going to produce a far better outcome for this hobby than the OGL ever could have. Allow me to say publicly and clearly, I support the O.R.C., I support the work that Paizo and these other companies are doing, and I want to see the O.R.C. embraced and successful inside of the TTRPG sphere. I think this is an incredible step in the right direction, and I think years from now, this will be seen as one of the most significant moments in the history of this hobby. Of course, all of this begs the question, what's next? What happens next for the TTRPG community? What's next for my channel? What's next for Paizo, for Dungeons & Dragons, for other RPGs that are out there? What does all of this mean, and what's the big picture takeaway? Well, first I want to talk about my thoughts for the TTRPG community, and that is, if you are a fan of this hobby, regardless of what game you play, I would encourage you to strongly consider putting your voice behind the Open RPG Creative License. The OGL was a great document and did a lot for gaming, and it deserves respect for the role that it played. But the O.R.C. is superior to the OGL in one important way, and that is, no one gaming company will control it. Wizards of the Coast has proven that one company controlling such an important document can have devastating effects, and I think it is truly beneficial to the gaming community that we push for a license like this that is system neutral, that is system agnostic, that is outside of the control of any one company. As much as I love Paizo, it is entirely possible that 20 years from now, Paizo could be under terrible management and making decisions that I disagree with, and if that were to happen, I wouldn't want Paizo to be in control of such an important license and such an important right. Regardless of what game you play, I encourage you seriously consider lending your voice to the Open RPG Creative License. I think putting this license in hands that safeguard the whole community is far superior to putting it in the hands that safeguard only a single company. If you don't like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, that's okay. I still think that the O.R.C. represents a good change for you and for the game that you support, Dungeons & Dragons included. Another thing that's worth noting here, Paizo has put out a call to support all of the third-party publishers, all of the third-party content creators who have been affected by the madness of the last couple of weeks. There are a lot of people whose livelihood has been on the line recently and who have been facing really difficult and terrifying decisions, and to the TTRPG community, show some love, show some support to your favorite content creators. For the people who are publishing the stuff that supports the game you love, whatever game that may be, take some time to support them. If nothing else, send them an email and just tell them why it is you love what they do. If there's a product you've been eyeing for a little bit, maybe go ahead and jump on that purchase. There are a lot of people who have been going through a difficult circumstance, and just a little bit of support could go a long way to helping alleviate the fear that they've been living with. I'm lucky in that YouTube is not my full-time job. I do not depend on the income that I get from this channel. I do this channel because it's fun. But I know there are a lot of people whose livelihood is tied up in that role of content creator, and a little bit of support goes a long way, I guarantee you. And then beyond all of that, let me just encourage you, if you enjoy RPGs as a hobby, if this is a game you love, regardless of the particular game you play, lend your voice to these conversations. I encourage you to speak up respectfully but clearly, and let your voice be heard in every corner that open gaming is the way to go, and that this is the direction that this hobby should take. I want everyone from the CEO of Wizards of the Coast to the smallest publisher in the RPG sphere to hear and hear clearly that open gaming is a mutually beneficial system that supports everyone inside of this hobby. The next question I want to talk about really quick is what's next for my channel? And the reality is, this news is ultimately not going to have a huge impact on my channel. It will have one short-term impact and one long-term impact. The short-term impact is this: with a lot of the upheaval that has happened in the TTRPG sphere, a lot of people are switching games right now, and there are a lot of people who are coming over to Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Now, I do have my Storytelling in Pathfinder 2e series that I've already been doing on this channel. I'm going to be trying to revamp that, since I know that there will be many new storytellers trying to learn how to use Pathfinder 2e. So I'm going to be looking at that series and figuring out how I can bring some more value with it. And I also know that there are many new players that are going to be looking at Pathfinder 2e and thinking about giving it a try. So I'm going to be reconsidering my schedule and figuring out what kind of content I can put out that might be useful, especially to new players who are looking at Pathfinder 2nd Edition for the first time. Allow me to say this: whether you are a longtime Pathfinder 2e player or someone who is brand new to the system, feel free to jump down into the comment section and let me know what kind of videos you're interested in. The gaming community has kind of been thrown up in the air, but I want this channel to be useful to you, so if there is a particular conversation that you are interested in, let me know and I will seriously consider it. I'm going to have to rearrange a bunch of videos anyways, so if you've got some ideas, I'd love to hear them. The long-term effects to my channel are relatively small because, let's be honest, this is primarily a Pathfinder 2e channel, so most of my content is Paizo content anyways. Going forward, I'm going to be very reluctant to discuss Dungeons & Dragons until I know exactly what the new open gaming license is going to look like. Just right now, I don't have any trust with Wizards of the Coast, and that makes me hesitant to discuss any of their products or any of their content, even in a general sense. Last year I tried out a new video comparing villains between two systems, and I did a versus battle between the Whispering Tyrant and a Sararak the Devourer. And I had a lot of people tell me they really loved that video and wanted to see more videos like it. And I've actually been scripting a couple of videos. One of them is Minkare versus a Charladon, which are major dragons from Pathfinder and Dungeons & Dragons respectively. And then I was also looking at Old Mage Jotimbe versus Elminster. For now, I am shelving those videos because I don't want to touch D&D content until I know exactly where Wizards is going to land. And that's just kind of a me protecting myself kind of thing. I'm sorry to the people who were interested in those videos. I just don't feel like I can make them right now. When this all calms down, when I know exactly where everything is going to land, I may return to those videos or other similar ideas, but for now I'm kind of shelving that, and I'm going to focus this channel a little more specifically on Pathfinder, Starfinder, and other ORC content that I find appealing. So I do apologize, what little D&D content I had on this channel is probably going away at least for a while. But there is an important change that I'd like to discuss, and that is, all hail the ORC, all hail the orc. I think the ORC represents an incredibly important change of direction for the TTRPG community. I think this is a phenomenal change, and I am incredibly excited for what the O.R.C. means to tabletop gaming. Now, I realize my channel is small and my voice is relatively limited, but if I can lend my voice to the success of the O.R.C., I'm going to do that. So, here is an offer I am making. If you're a third-party author or publisher who makes TTRPG content and you support the Open RPG Creative License, I want to feature your content. I'm willing to give any publisher who is supporting the O.R.C. a free sponsorship slot, if you will, on this channel. I know my voice is small, but hey, it's free advertising. There is no charge to you. I don't expect you to sponsor multiple videos or anything like that. If you are lending your voice to the O.R.C., I would love to share some of the content that you have created with the community and help bring light to the creative work that you are doing. To any third-party author or publisher who would be interested in sharing some of their content on my channel, please reach out to me at thelocaldisastertourguide@gmail.com, and I will be glad to talk to you about setting up a free sponsorship slot in one of my videos. Now, there are a couple of conditions if you would like me to feature some of your content on this channel. The first condition is this: you must publicly support the O.R.C. I don't care how you do this. It could be something as simple as a tweet that you've put out. I just need to see some evidence that you publicly support the O.R.C., and if I see that, I will be glad to highlight some of your content. The second thing I will say, since this is a public invitation, is what I say to anyone who advertises on my channel. Anything that I share on this channel must be family friendly. I work with individuals with disabilities in real life, and some of them watch this channel, so I am very particular about the kind of content I share. So if you are interested in sharing some of your work on this channel, just be aware that I'm going to ask that any work that you share be considered family friendly. But beyond those two considerations, if you support the O.R.C., I would love to highlight some of the work you're doing. The collective creativity of this hobby as a whole is its greatest strength, and if I can highlight that creativity, I would love to do it. But now, before I close this video, there is one last thing that I really want to do, and that is, I want to address Wizards of the Coast directly. Now, I understand my voice is small. I understand that I don't have a ton of reach, and the actual likelihood that somebody from Wizards of the Coast might hear what I have to say is ultimately minuscule. I understand that. But I do think it is important to address Wizards of the Coast directly, because so much of what has happened in the last couple of weeks has revolved around the decisions that they have made. So, Wizards of the Coast, if you're listening, here's what I would like to say to you. Number one, WotC, I respect you, but I can't support you. This is a very hard thing for me. Wizards, some of the best memories in my life involve me and my friends sitting around a table and playing a game that you published. Seriously, some of the greatest moments of my life, some of the things I'm going to be laughing about when I'm 80 plus years old in a nursing home, some of the best stuff I have ever done happened as a result of the product you made. Wizards of the Coast, you had a phenomenal influence on this hobby, on this community, and the original Open Gaming License is one of the most important things that probably ever happened inside of TTRPGs. WotC, I hope you know, I respect you. You have done some incredible work, and I honestly believe you still have the capacity to do incredible work. Yes, I'm a Paizo fanboy. Yes, I love Pathfinder, and anyone who watches this channel knows that, and at least for the foreseeable future, Pathfinder's probably going to be my main game. But I want you to know, Wizards, I don't have any antagonism towards you. I don't have any bitter spirit towards you. I want Dungeons and Dragons to be successful. I run a tabletop RPG club at my school, and I will be standing there talking Pathfinder, and my students will be standing there talking D&D, and we have a great time sharing stories. I want Pathfinder and D&D and all of the other games out there to be successful. WotC, I respect you. I respect the work you have done in the past, and I respect many of the wonderful contributions you have made to this hobby, but right now, I don't support you and I can't support you because you have walked away from some of the values that you have represented in the past. In your discussions around the open gaming license, again and again and again, you've said things about our open gaming license is not meant to help our competitors. They're not your competitors. Paizo's success is not your failure any more than your success is Paizo's failure. A diverse and growing gaming community is the goal, not an obstacle. And you once advocated for the kind of open gaming that allowed this hobby to grow to heights that would have been unfathomable to so many people who have been in this hobby for so long. You made some drastic changes that helped this industry and this hobby to grow, and now you're undercutting it for what honestly looks to be very selfish reasons. And for that reason, Wizards, I can't support you. It was hard for me to tell at the advent of 4th edition if your actions were simply reckless or deliberately harmful. But WotC, right now it seems like your actions are deliberately harmful, and even if that's not what you intended, you have shown such a callous disregard for the people sitting at the same table as you that it makes me not want to play your game. Wizards of the Coast, I hope a day comes that I can sit down and play Dungeons and Dragons again and share some more great stories, because I've had some great stories playing your games. I want to play another game of D&D and celebrate all of the fantastic joy that goes into that. I am not cheering for your downfall, but I am hoping that the last couple of weeks has helped to humble you and helped you to realize what values truly made you successful as a company. The other thing I want to say to you, Wizards of the Coast, is this. You can't grow a gaming community by trying to take seats away from the table. Looking at the people to your left and to your right and asking who's too big, who's too small, who do we want here, who do we want gone, ultimately what you are doing is tearing the community apart. One of the best things about TTRPGs as a hobby is the fact that I have sat down at gaming tables with people from all over the world, from all sorts of different backgrounds, and I have gotten to celebrate this hobby with people who are vastly different from me. I have played this game with people from almost every continent on the face of the globe, and with people from almost every cultural or religious or irreligious persuasion you could possibly imagine. I haven't gotten to play with someone from Australia yet, but if you're from Australia and want to play with me, let me know. The reality is, a large and growing community is what makes this hobby great, and Wizards of the Coast, you think you're protecting yourself by pulling chairs away from the table, but really the only thing you're doing is taking people out of the community and making the community smaller. That doesn't help. Wizards, if somebody from your company is listening, I hope you have a heart change. There was a time where you represented some of the best of what this industry could be, and I hope there's a day where that's true of you again. You've done some great stuff in the past, and I truly hope you do great stuff again in the future. I may not be buying your product now, but I hope that's not forever. My voice may be small, but I hope you hear, in all sincerity and truth, that as frustrated as I may be in the moment, that I don't wish ill for you. I just want to see you return to the great company I know you can be. But that brings us to the end of the video. I have talked about a lot of stuff this evening, and I feel like I've barely scratched the surface of what the last 2 weeks has meant to the gaming community and to me personally. I do think that we are witnessing a very important moment in the history of tabletop RPGs, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts about what all of this controversy around OGL 1.0A, 1.1, 2.0, the OGL, the O.R.C. I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic because I do think we have witnessed something very interesting and very important in the history of this hobby and this game. I do realize there are probably a few fans of this channel who are going to be upset with me that I didn't wait until the complete end of my vacation, but don't worry, I am going to go back to not working on videos again very soon because, like I said, I kind of need to reshuffle my schedule anyways. So don't worry, I'm still going to get some rest. But for now, let me turn the conversation over to you. Let me know your thoughts on the OGL, on the O.R.C, and on everything that's happened for the last couple of weeks. Don't forget, if you are a publisher who does support the O.R.C, please reach out to me at thelocaldisastertourguide@gmail.com. I would be very interested in featuring some of your content on this channel, regardless of what game your content is made for. And as always, don't forget to do all that YouTube stuff. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, check out Discord, Patreon, all that good stuff. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.